Welcome to San Diego Integral, January 8th, 2022. Our topic this month is Illness, Disability, and Aging as a Path for Growth, presented by Lynn Fuentes. We'll start today's meeting with a centering meditation led by Kathy Andrews.
So we welcome everybody to straighten their backs, feel your rear end on the surface of whatever you're sitting on, whether it's a floor or a chair. Feel yourself in the room that you're in. Remember that you're safe and things are working. You're with people you want to be with. We're all safe and present. And we can remember our breath. And notice we're breathing in and out. Take a big exhale. Take your time with an inhale and pause at the top. And a big exhale. One more breath. Take your time breathing in and pause at the top and a nice big exhale. And we can take a moment to smile, have a moment to think about things we're grateful for. We're grateful for the smiles on people's faces that we see. Grateful for the connections we have. And we can hand the meeting back to Eloy.
Okay. Well, welcome to San Diego Integral. I'm Eloy Mays. I'm a member of our San Diego Integral leadership team, along with Tom, Liz, Kathy, and Jerry, who couldn't be here today. And we have an exciting presentation today on illness, disability, and aging as a path for growth with Lynn. We'll begin shortly, but first I want to mention that we will be recording this meeting, and if you prefer not to be seen on the video, you can turn off your camera, although we like to see your faces. The link to this recording will be posted on, actually, it'll be posted on the Meetup, but we're also going to have it in a private YouTube channel. It takes us a couple days to get it edited, so we'll let you know as soon as it's available. Also, you can find all our events at our website at sandiegointegral.org. We'll put that in the chat later. We're also on Meetup, of course, and Facebook, and you can find links to those in our website as well. So please join one of those groups. That way you'll automatically be notified when a new event is added. If you ever have any questions about meetups or these meetings, you're welcome to contact one of the leadership teams through either Meetup or Facebook. And next month, we'll be meeting on February 12th with the topic of the creative power of the culture war. So please save the date for that. And finally, we invite you to make a small donation today. Donations help cover the meetup costs, web hosting, etc. That can be found also at sandiegointegral.org. We'll put that up in a bit too. And so we will have some Q&A later. When that comes up, you're welcome to unmute your mic or raise your hand with the raise your hand button, and one of our hosts can call on you. If you're on a laptop or desktop, this button's at the lower edge of your screen. If you're on a phone or tablet, you may need to touch the screen to activate the menu at the bottom and find it under More. We usually have a chat host, but we were so scrambling today. Well, we're up to 28 people, so that's great. Right after the meeting, we'll have an informal chat segment for about 30 to 60 minutes. It's always rich and interesting, and there's room for more Q&A, and you're welcome to stay on for that. Before we start the presentation, we'd like to take a moment to welcome any new members. So if you're new, just popcorn style, unmute yourself and please briefly say your name, where you're calling from, and how you heard about San Diego Integral. So who's new here today?
I'm Laurel.
Laurel? Go ahead,
Yes.
Laurel.
I'm Laurel, and I'm from San Diego, and I found you guys on Meetup.
Yay. Okay. Marissa, did I see you? Yeah.
Yes. Hi, I'm Marisa, and I'm from Orange County, and I also found you on Meetup.
Great. Eric? Oh, you're muted still, Eric. You can unmute by hitting the space bar on if you're on a computer. Okay, Aubrey?
Hi, I'm Aubrey. I'm coming from Chevy Chase, Maryland, and I found you all through Meetup.
Yay. Eric, looks like you're unmuted now.
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm from San Diego. I found you guys on Meetup too.
Yay. Anybody else?
Eve and Sally Donnelly, and it's our first time, and we heard about it from you, Eloy.
Okay, cool. All right. Oh, Tamar, are you just waving?
Well, I'm not new, but I've never presented myself. So I'm Tamar from Austin, Texas. And well, I'm in Integral, so I don't know how I found about you, but I'm glad I did. So
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, and I'll pass the meeting over to Kathy Andrews, who will introduce our speaker. So Kathy. Oh, and Tom, can you give Kathy host? Change the host to her.
All right, welcome everybody. There's the challenges we have today that remind us what it's like when we think things are going wrong, such as when we get a chronic illness or become disabled, that we fret about how we'll handle the challenges and that we won't be able to do it. But we can use these challenging times also for growth. In this workshop, we'll look at how the integral models offer us ways to navigate these particularly disoriented human dilemmas and can help us shift our perspective from tragedy to transcendence. And but specifically what today we'll be talking about illness, disability, and aging. And our speaker today is someone who's making her life out of this. Lynn Fuentes is CEO of Transformation Teaching. She's been a lawyer, a mediator, an educational course designer, and a university professor and administrator. She's designed and taught courses in transpersonal psychology, writing, planning, chronic illness, and conflict management at Prescott College and DePaul University. At DePaul, she also founded and directed the Chronic Illness Initiative, a program to help students with chronic illness obtain a degree. She's been a long-term caregiver for severely ill family members herself and has been a volunteer in many capacities at nonprofits in Chicago. She's been a student of integral philosophy since 1993 and regularly teaches on stage development and the application of integral theory to chronic illness. Currently, her primary focus is the Koan of Illness program, which she offers online throughout the year. Welcome, Lynn. I'll hand over the virtual mic to you for the next, until 6 o'clock or so.
Do I have it now? Am I on? Do I have the hosting? Okay, I'm going to share my screen. No, it says host disabled screen sharing.
Yeah, Kathy, you need to make her co-host.
All righty.
This is stuff we usually do before the meeting, so sorry about that.
I must not be host yet because I don't have that capability yet.
Tom, can you make Lynn co-host?
a lot of people on email cannot connect because there is something wrong with the link. We had to go through the application and put a number.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody's
We couldn't figure out what was going on there.
Yeah. Well, some people have found their way.
So Kathy, you're host. You should be able to make Lynn co-host.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Oh, wait a minute.
So just click on her
I'm
picture.
a little scrambled. Got it. She's
Okay.
Okay.
now she's co-host.
Okay, very good.
All right. So now I also am the person who admits people. I just
No, we can.
you can still do that.
There's several other people that can do that too, so we'll
All
take
right.
care of that. You
I
don't need
won't
to
worry
pay
about
attention.
that then. Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Sorry about all the confusion. And I will go ahead and start and try not to be too wordy so that we can get through everything. So I'm going to start out, share my screen here. And I'm going to figure out how to do the presenter view of this thing so that you see it. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that now. Yay. All right. Well, today I'm going to talk about illness, disability, and aging as a path for growth. My expertise is really in chronic illness. So I'll be referring to that probably a little more than the other two subjects, but in reality, they all can produce disability. So we'll be talking about the same thing. A little bit about my own background. I functioned mostly as a caregiver for many, many years. And only recently myself, about 2 years ago, developed a chronic illness. And I'm also aging. I just had a bout with bursitis in which I was limping around, and I thought, whoa, I'm getting a taste of all of this now. So anyway, in the process of doing this, I started this Koan of Illness program. It's, if you're interested, it's thekoanofillness.com. And I started trying to put together all of the things that I had found that were helpful. And one of those things was the integral model. And I used the integral models and in the courses that I teach there. So I found them terrifically helpful. So I gather there are a number of new people here who may not know the integral model. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but when we have the breakouts, maybe Kathy, if there's a way to put me in with the newer people and I can explain if they have questions or something like that. I don't know if we can do that. So hopefully this will not be Greek to everybody. So I just wanted to start out with a little bit about disability. The 26% of people in the United States, that's 1 in 4, have a disability. In 2016, over half of these people were working ages, 18 to 64. So it's not, as you can see, not all end of life issues. For older people, however, 35.2% had a disability, which is a very high number. And just to give some statistics about aging, in 2019, about 16% of the American population was over 65. This number is growing rapidly from 1950, when only 8%, so it's doubled since then, and it's expected to go up to 23% by 2060. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. So chronic illness is a factor in 6 in 10 lives. And 4 in 10 people in the US have 2 or more illnesses. Often when people get an illness, because of that one, they can often get another one, or there are many comorbid conditions. So people often have more than one illness. Here's a list of some common illnesses: autism, autoimmune conditions, blindness, cancer. These are all different kinds of disabilities: heart disease, celiac disease, deafness, depression, epilepsy, missing limbs, nervous system conditions, psychiatric conditions. All of those can lead to disability. Among children and young people, it is also more and more common. Some studies show that 20 to 30% of teenagers have a chronic illness. This is defined as one that lasts longer than 6 months. And 10 to 13% of them report having a condition that substantially limits their daily life. Now, an additional burden that's going to be placed on our society is they are anticipating that 1.5 to 2 million people are expected to experience long COVID, which is a very debilitating condition similar to ME/CFS, which already affects 1 to 2 million people. So we could have 4 million people with symptoms similar to long COVID. So that's a lot of people. 6 in 10 with chronic illness, 20% of people over 65, 10 to 20% of teenagers, and the number is growing in every single group. And yet, what came as such a surprise to me is we pay very little attention to them. We tend to see them as other than normal. Everything is geared to people who are healthy. And we see people with illness as sort of stepping aside. We only have the acute illness model in most cases, where they step aside, they get better, and then they come back into ordinary life. But for somebody with a chronic illness, that doesn't happen. So it seems like when people can hide the fact of illness in our world, or minimize it, sickness, aging, and death, they seem to do that. And that's been since the time of the Buddha. Buddha went out and discovered all of these things out there that are actually a fundamental part of being human. So disability is a matter for everybody, and it can lead to many, many other problems, complex problems like poverty, can cause people to be unable to work, to have problems with education. Often there's real bureaucratic overload because of all of the bureaucracy that surrounds chronic illness. A lot of times the healthcare is not sufficient. Healthcare has been really highlighted recently, and I think we're seeing all of the problems with the system. People with illness can be discriminated against, and illness can lead to more illness. So what I want to do today is use some integral models to examine the phenomenon. And the models I want to use, the first one is the 4 quadrants. And for those who don't know what that is, it's a way of dividing up reality, our experience, into 4 different categories. One category is our internal experience. When something happens, we have a reaction. We have our emotional reaction, we have our thoughts, our psychology, all that sort of thing. So thinking of illness, that hits us in that way. Illness also hits us in the upper right quadrant, which is the quadrant of things in our world, our physical environment. So, you know, when you think of all of the treatments, the medications, the medical devices, offices, hospitals, all the things in our world, that's another area we talk about. The lower left quadrant is the relationship quadrant. So with an illness, there are relationships with family members, with friends, with doctors, with healthcare specialists, all kinds of relationships. And those are all affected by illness. And then the lower right quadrant is the systems of our world. So the hospital system, the insurance system, the employment system. We'll find ourselves with illness or disability dealing with all of these systems. So when we look at these quadrants, we can take a problem that's going on. You know, somebody is, for instance, having a hard time with their getting their medication. So you can look and you can say to yourself, is this an issue with the fact that the medication is too expensive? Is it to do with the fact that maybe their culture doesn't accept this kind of treatment? Or is it an issue with the individual person who has read the label and says, I'm not going to take this? Or is it a problem of the system? Maybe there's a distribution problem. So any issue can be looked at through these quadrants, and it can be very helpful to do that. The stages model is another one we'll use, and that is the model of adult development. The discovery that people do not actually stop growing when they're 21, which anybody over 40 can probably tell you is true, that we continue to grow all our lives. And as we grow, we take on perspectives and we drop other perspectives. So when we're young, teenagers, we see the world one way. When we're in our 20s, we might see it another way. Our 30s, our 40s, as we go along, we will change our perspective. So out there in the world are all kinds of perspectives on illness that we have to deal with. So we run into people at different stages of development with a different worldview of illness. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And there are three other models. I'm not going to go into those because I'm not going to actually discuss them today. And I don't want to overload new people with too much. So just some common symptoms to keep in mind of illness, disability, and aging. Very common symptoms are fatigue, often extreme fatigue. Pain can range from mild to almost unbearable. Reduced mobility, unable to get out of bed, unable to leave the house, perhaps also unable to walk or something like that. So those are some common symptoms that people get. So as we move into our, here's a picture of the quadrants. I should have had that earlier. So you can see the quadrants. The upper left quadrant is the interior individual, our personal experience, our thoughts, our attitudes, our beliefs. So an example of this is, how does this illness make me feel? How do I think about it? So I get long COVID. How do I think about it? Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I mystified? All that sort of thing. The upper right, exterior individual, is about physical facts, observations, and applications. So in illness, you might look at what objective facts exist. So you go in and you get some test results or something like that. The lower level is the we, lower left is the we quadrant. And this is about interpersonal or group culture. So an example here might be how people relate to me since I became ill. And then the lower right is the systems. And so an example here would be how insurance and workplace issues come into play. So I thought we could have a breakout. And if we could do, I don't know how much time we have, 10 minutes, Kathy. And the questions, I think I gave you a shortened version of the question that you can put in the chat or whatever. So we'll go into groups of 3 and discuss what would your response be, or what has your response been if you are somebody with an illness. If you were told you had an incurable illness with these symptoms, fatigue, pain, reduced mobility, that could last for the rest of your life. So you couldn't work like you did, you couldn't sleep like you did, you couldn't eat like you used to, you couldn't exercise like you used to, you couldn't socialize like you used to, you couldn't even think often like you used to. So I'd like us to just get a sense of what that might feel like. And for those of you who understand the quadrant model, you might come at it from that direction. Think about, what would your upper left feelings be? What would your upper right treatment possibilities be? What would your community, your relationship, spouse, children, parents, friends, that sort of thing, what happens there? And then what happens in the systems of your life? So I thought we could all just take maybe 3 people with 3 minutes each, something like that. Would that work, Kathy?
I got that all set up.
Okay, fantastic.
You know what, maybe just for time, that I'm going to decrease it to 9 minutes, just to catch us up a little bit. And we'll see everybody back in 9 minutes, and I will post that question into the chat once you get there.
Okay, thank you.
So here you go.
Breakout sessions are not recorded, so here's Lynn after the breakout.
Okay, all right. Well, I hope you all got a sense of some different perspectives, some different ways that people have experienced illness themselves or related to it. The next model I want to look is at the stages of development. And this is a lot to take in if you haven't been a part of Integral. But in the Integral model, we talk about adult development, and we talk about development actually through the lifespan. So we come in as infants here, whoa, what's going on? We develop a kind of a tribal sense, and then we get a sense of, wow, I'm me somewhere in our childhood, and we start looking for autonomy, and it's my way or the highway and that kind of thing. And then gradually we grow up and we realize that we need to trade a little of this. It's all about me and and what I want for being with a group. So then we move into this more traditional stage where we learn how to be part of a group. We adopt rules and roles and things like that. And then we are there for a while, and a lot of people will stay there the rest of their lives, but some will say, wait a minute, I'm a little tired of the group think. I want to break out, think for myself a little bit. New things are cropping up for me. And so they'll move into this orange modern stage where rationality is important, science is important, where achievement, success, and all those kinds of things come to the fore. And some people will go beyond that stage. They'll get a sort of maybe is that all there is feeling and move into this green postmodern world where sensitivity matters, heart matters, context matters. This is where people become concerned about marginalized groups. Most of our modern like environmental movements and things like that have come from this group. Then we make this jump to the integral stage, which is what this group is about, where we begin to realize that all of this is a part of us. And all of these types of views are going to be present in our culture. And so we attempt to learn to take the best from each of them, learn how to work with each of them. So that's what we do in integral. So that's just a brief look at these, but you can realize that each one of these stages is going to have a perspective on everything. If you're a red warrior stage, if you're into this, it's all about me, maybe a teenager or something like that, you're going to be concerned that illness will take away your power. So illness is like a really bad deal. You don't want to get that because now you're powerless and you could be vulnerable and that sort of thing. At the amber level here, this traditional level, you're going to feel like, oh, illness is going to take me away from fulfilling my roles. And I'm not going to be able to keep up with the group because belonging at this level is a very important thing. So illness is really negative for this group. It takes them away from that. So this group, which is very much about success and achievement, illness, not a good thing. It's going to take me away from succeeding. It's going to interfere with my achievement, my status, all those kinds of things. And then somebody who with this perspective gets ill, they say, well, it's taking me away from sharing with other people, connecting, that sort of thing. And also there's a feeling often with people at this level that illness is somehow a sign that they're not aligned with their true spirit, that somehow they've done something wrong. So all of these tiers, all of these first tier views, and all of the views up to integral are called first tier in integral theory. They're all very negative. They all focus on the misery, the psychological misery. You can think of Kubler-Ross's stages of dealing with death, but it's the same thing with illness. Denial, a lot of times people get sick, oh no, I'm not sick, I won't talk about it. Bargaining, oh, if I do this, I'll get well if I do that. Anger, how the heck did this happen to me? It shouldn't have happened to me. And grief, terrible sadness over the losses that happen. There's a lot of negativity about illness. It's seen as a tragedy. It's seen as something that ruins one's life, something that should not have happened, or even something unnecessary. Somehow the person did something wrong and it was their own fault. And then there's the separatism. People are isolated and excluded. And then there's a denial that it's even a valid lifestyle because you're not being productive, you're not conforming, or you're not aligned. So very, very negative view of illness. So each of these negative outlooks leads to even more damage. So the red level, if your power is taken away, you have a lot of resistance, stress, probably poor relationships, fear. At the amber traditional level, you may have a lot of shame or guilt. Why am I being punished? A sense of being isolated from the group. If you're at the orange level, you may have a lot of shame, loss of self-esteem, anger at the loss of your earning power, sadness over the loss of your potential, guilt over not succeeding at life. And then at the green stage, there can be also shame, guilt for not being spiritual enough. Somehow this idea that if I'm only spiritual enough, I would always be well. Guilt for not taking care of the body and the psyche, for not using the right healing methods. And this group is very interested in alternative healing, or for not being loving enough. Or sometimes it will take the perspective of, I will not think about it. I will not go there. I will not be negative. I'll ignore sickness, aging, and death, so it won't happen to me. So I'll just keep up my immune system, think positively, become more spiritual, and that's going to solve the problem. But these attitudes, and we can certainly understand where they all came from, and they would all be a part of most people with illness in some way. These attitudes actually are very, very destructive because they make it easier when the sick person adopts these kinds of attitudes themselves. It makes it easier for others to discriminate against them. So if we are blaming ourselves and feeling shame, it allows other people to dump shame and blame on us, because somebody who feels ashamed and blaming themselves isn't likely to resist it, like a person who would say, wait a minute, this is not my fault. I'm not going to take that kind of attitude from you. People often feel less entitled to decent treatment, and that can lead to poor boundaries and more invasive. And by treatment, I mean the way people are with them. Families can reject people with illness. I know many, many circumstances where that's happened, and they can be left helpless. Social groups often don't offer ways to participate. And that's something that COVID has shown us is possible. I've often gone to groups and thought we should have like 10 empty chairs in this room so that we know that these are all the people who might have liked to have been here, but couldn't be here. Because again, we're so oblivious. Doctors can shunt difficult patients, in other words, those who are not easily cured, off to psychologists. And they can be directed away from physical treatments and toward psychological treatment, even when that's not appropriate. Corporations fire people with illness. Research will dry up if the illness is trivialized or if it's seen as all in your head. The main illness that I have come to learn about is ME/CFS. It's myalgic encephalomyelitis, otherwise known as chronic fatigue syndrome, which has been trivialized for 20 years. That made it hard to find researchers who were willing to stake their career on an illness that other people told them was all in their head. So it's very hard to get good research on an illness in this case. And then insurance companies are let off the hook. They can offer a brief stint of mental health care, but not care for 30 years, 40 years, adequate care for somebody with a serious illness or disability. So I was leaving time for another breakout. We have time for, where are we on the, let's see, do you know what time it is, Kathy?
5 o'clock Pacific time.
What?
5 o'clock Pacific.
5 o'clock Pacific time. Okay. Well, we could take another short time and break out and have a little discussion about where you might have seen some of these attitudes and behaviors play out. And then for those of you who understand the integral perspective, consider maybe what would an integral view look like. So if we could do 3 people again, 3 minutes, that work?
3 people each. I've got that all set up.
Okay.
And so with no further ado, we'll send people off and I'll put the question into the chat, which is going to be share examples of where you have seen these worldviews play out. What might an integral view look like? See you in 9 minutes.
Okay, so I don't know if many of you had a chance to get to what an integral view might look like, but it brings, an integral view brings a new awareness to all of these things. And it gives us a number of different ways to look at this problem. The first thing it does is it helps us recognize the partial nature of previous attitudes. So the idea that illness is a punishment, for example, we can look back and we can say, okay, I can understand how people would see that within certain contexts and that kind of thing. Or maybe, you know, if you smoked and drank too much for 20 years, you could say you're being punished by illness. But that's it for most cases, it's not true. It's just not true that the illness is a punishment. It's something that's happened to a person out of no fault of their own or no more fault than anybody else's. So that's one of the things we notice. We also begin to notice the multi-systemic causes, that there are many, many things that bring about illness, and it can, you know, every single person's body. I've noticed, you know, I have weak spots. When something, you know, stresses me, certain parts of me start to have difficulty. And in fact, everybody in the world has some weak spots. You know, nobody's body is perfect. It's like we come into this world and we put on our human suit, and it's usually, you know, not always working correctly. And some of us get a real nice sports car, and the others of us get something that's sort of clunking along and not working so well. So it's, I think we can be quite clear on the fact that illness is not the fault of the person who has it. We get an understanding of the systems in which we operate. So we can stand back and look at the healthcare system, for example, and get a much bigger picture rather than just being immersed in it. We can stand back from it and we can examine it and we can see how it works. The level above integral actually sees the empty nature of systems, the fact that it was just created out of nothing, really, and could be completely taken down and recreated, which I think a lot of us would like to see if that could be done. We also start to see with something like illness or disability or aging, the possibility of acceptance. Kubler-Ross wrote about these stages: denial, bargaining, anger, grief. The next stage was acceptance. So when people were facing their death, they would go through all of these different reactions, and often they would come finally to acceptance. And that's a real milestone, I think, for anybody who's dealing with aging. Accepting the fact that you're aging, not an easy thing to do. Accepting the fact that you have an illness, that's not an easy thing to do. Accepting the fact you have a disability, very, very difficult. But it moves us into this higher way of seeing, and even transcendence. I got the name for the koan of illness from a friend of mine, Francis Bennett, a spiritual teacher, who was working as a chaplain and went to visit a woman who had a very, very severe form of cancer, was in terrible shape. And she kept saying, why me? Why me? Why me? And Francis said to her, well, I guess that's your koan. And she actually took that to her spiritual heart, as it were. And the last few weeks and months of her life, she was in an absolutely transcendent state, that she had lived with that koan and transcended as a result of it. So I thought that was beautiful. So I give the name Koan of Illness to my program. We also see the possibilities of 4-quadrant cause and 4-quadrant healing. Illness can arise in any quadrant. So you can have upper left quadrant person, stress can lead to illness. A lot of emphasis on that these days. Lower left, relationship problems can cause people to get into illness. Upper right quadrant, germs, viruses, all of those sorts of things lead to illness. Lower right quadrant, things like pollution and stuff can lead to illness. So if you're living next to a toxic waste dump, the answer is not to get more spiritual in the upper left quadrant. The answer is to move away from the place that's causing you to be sick. So I think one of the things that you can see with an integral view is that there is no one solution to illness, as it were, but there are different solutions for different aspects of illness, and each one of these can affect the other. And we also come to a place, the possibilities of conscious aging. I think Heidi Hornlines, who's another integralist, has a program called Conscious Aging. So, okay, so now I have no idea how to move to the next slide. Oh, wait. Okay, there I go. All right. So what if we were to be even more radical than, I don't think I'm in the right place. Yes, I am. Okay. It's harder for me to follow now. I think we can take an even more radical picture of illness. And we can say that it is an inextricable part of being human. Particularly the New Age wants to lop off illness. It wants to lop off everything that's negative and send it away somewhere, and will only focus on the positive. But that throws out an enormous part of life, and life is everything. And so if we don't welcome the suffering and the illness and the disability and the aging into our humanity, we're cutting off a portion of ourselves. So I think we can say it's not a mistake. It's not something we need to fix. It's particularly not something we need to fix in others. And by fix, I mean, tell them they're doing it wrong, tell them what they should be doing, tell them you have the answer, tell them you just read an article and you know exactly what they need to do, and all this sort of thing. We want to fix people. We want to get them out of this illness state because it makes us uncomfortable. And if we are ill, we want to get ourselves out of the state because it's uncomfortable. But being uncomfortable, being in these situations is something that can cause us to grow. One of the main things that's regarded as helping us to grow is what they call disorienting dilemmas. And illness certainly is a disorienting dilemma, whether you have it, whether you care for somebody who has it, or whether you just look out into the world today, where we're facing illness in every corner of life. And so instead of trying to push it away, we just say, it's here. It's not a mistake. It's not a sign we're doing anything wrong. And it's not something to rail at the universe. It's just simply a part of what is. And coming to accept what is part of the spiritual path. And so I think illness can help us a great deal with that. So we can use illness, I think, to grow up. In Integral, we say we want to grow up, wake up, clean up, show up. So just looking at grow up for the moment, we can use illness as a workshop for ourselves. So if I'm the person who's ill, I can look at this belief, maybe an Amber belief, that I have to be perfect to belong. Nobody will want me unless I'm perfect. And if we realize 6 out of 10 people out there have some serious chronic illness, and 30% of the population is over 65 or going to be, most of those people out there are not perfect. They're far from perfect. And so we can see that. We can grow up out of this traditional Amber belief that somehow I have to be perfect to belong. So that's just one way. There are many, many ways that we can grow. Another way is we can tame this orange striving for success, this view that seems to be lodged in our culture that achievement is everything. There's just endless messages out there. We're in a very orange modernist culture, and the messages that you must achieve and you must always push yourself and all these sorts of things are completely antithetical to somebody with illness. It's not something that they can do or should do. And it narrows life down to one direction. There's only one way you're supposed to live, and it's this way, instead of acknowledging that there are many ways to be human. And I think we can also grow up out of our green postmodern judgmentalism, this idea that somehow you're to blame for your illness, that it's your own fault. And that is put on people. I see that as like a spirituality being used as a club that there's it's a very, for a group that's supposed to be sensitive and heart-centered, it's a very unkind, very cruel thing to do, to take that attitude. And it's just not true. So we can also use this idea of growing up to gain acceptance and redirection for our lives. So we learn to become the manager of our own lives. One of the things that always shocked me about it is there's nobody out there managing us. You have this person and this specialist and that, and they're always changing now. You get a different doctor every time. Nobody manages this whole thing. And it took me a long time to come to the place that, wait a minute, nobody else is going to manage this but me. I'm the one who decides on the treatment in the end. And in a way, the doctor, that they're consultants to me. I am the manager. I get to choose. I go and consult these people who have knowledge. But really taking that on, that was not an easy step. So I can become the manager of my illness. I can become the manager of my disability. I can become the manager of my aging. How do I want to see this? How do I want to be in each quadrant? What do I want my feelings about this to be? What do I want the physical environment of my life to be? What do I want my relationships to look like? What kind of systems can help me? So I need to take that on myself. This is the integral view. We also can learn to let go of what other people think. So there's, as soon as we are, in some way, we think different from what everybody else is, even though we're really not. We start thinking about what other people think of us. And so we can use illness and disability and aging as an opportunity to learn to just let go of that and be there for ourselves. We can forgive ourselves and others for getting sick or getting old. We seem to punish people for that instead of forgiving for that. We can forgive ourselves for the negative attitudes that we might have towards ourselves or towards others. And we can forgive ourselves and others for being so insensitive to people with illness, so oblivious as I was for the first 38 years of my life, totally oblivious. I had no idea. I go to work, I didn't know that maybe the person's next to me in the office next to me would go home at night and just collapse because they were so sick and spend all weekend trying to do their medical treatments. Whereas I was, dancing off doing whatever fun thing I did at that age. So, okay, so now, okay, is that the next one? Okay, so we can also grow up spiritually. We can develop qualities of what's called spiritual intelligence. Cindy Wigglesworth has put forth this idea of spiritual intelligence. We know about emotional intelligence and cognitive intelligence, but we can grow spiritually intelligent. And some of the qualities of people who have spiritual intelligence include things like forgiveness, gratitude, patience, endurance, and we're better can we learn these kinds of things if we didn't have negative things like illness and disability. Where would we learn endurance? Where would we learn patience? Where would we learn gratitude if there weren't the negative half of life for us to deal with? We can learn kindness. We can offer love instead of judgment. We can learn to change what we can, the serenity prayer. And we can learn to share the burden, not to have to take it all on ourselves, nor to have to give it to everybody. And then there's the waking up or transcendence. So we can learn to accept what is. And I think that's probably one of the most fundamental things, to learn to accept what is and to accept it as quickly as possible is what brings peace to life. If we're always struggling with something, with the fact that it's there, it makes life very difficult. Illness can also help us to take time for silence, for presence, for meditation and contemplation. Those are things that somebody who is ill can do. And in many ways, and I think in my opinion, those are like the most important aspects of life. I've come to see silence, presence, meditation, contemplation as fundamental to fundamental to life. So we can see disability as this lifetime's opportunity to understand suffering and loss. Maybe some people are coming into this lifetime to understand achievement and success and making a lot of money, and other people are coming here to understand suffering and loss. There is no order of better in that. I often think that I see people up in wherever they are between lives, and somebody comes along and says, who's going to take on the really tough job? Who's going to take on an illness in this lifetime? And some brave souls volunteer, and off they go. Now they forget they've done that, but we might look at them with a lot more respect if we thought of it that way. Another aspect of waking up is seeing the self as more than just the body mind. One of the things that illness can help us to do is to step back and step out from this body mind and realize that we are not that. We are awareness. We are more than that. And this body mind may be suffering, but we ourselves are something more than that. And then we can also, the spiritual lesson of letting go. And ultimately, when you think of aging, ultimately you let go of everything. You know, you lose relationships. If you get old enough, everybody you know dies. If you, your body breaks down, various parts of it, and more and more and more of it, everything in your life will break down, and finally you will die and you'll lose your life. So it's the ultimate lesson in letting go. Aging comes to everybody. Illness comes to people earlier. They get, you could say, even an opportunity to learn these things at a younger age than many of us do. So I actually teach a course on illness and spirituality, which is coming up in March. And I'll put that in the chat sometime if anybody's interested. I'm teaching one right now on personal growth. I take a 6-course series over the year. We talk about empowerment, trauma, relationships, growth, spirituality, and then integration. So I thought we'd do another breakout. And this time what I'd like to think about is what we can learn from people who are disabled. Because to me, they are probably our greatest teachers in many respects. And I think we don't see this. And I think that people with illness don't see that they are teachers and that they can be teachers. There was somebody in my group, one of the groups, who said that when COVID hit and everybody went to working online, she had to help her coworkers understand how to do this. But people who have had an illness for a long time, they know how to handle this problem now. In fact, much of this has been a bit of a boon. They have learned a lot of things about patience, about endurance, about spirituality. So I thought we might take a little time and think about what we might learn from people with these problems. So I don't know how I'm doing on time, Kathy.
Yeah, let's talk about that for less than a minute. It's now 5:31 and you wanted to end at 5:45.
Oh, we're doing great.
So yeah, when we talked about it originally, we were talking about 7 minutes. So we can adjust that to be a little bit longer.
We can do 9 again.
All right, I'll set that up.
Okay.
Right, if everybody's keen on that, wait a minute. Go. And we'll see everybody in 9 minutes.
Okay. Well, I can kind of slow down now because we are where I thought we should be. But I feel like I've been rushing somewhat. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to, there's a quote here from Sri Aurobindo that I thought was really great. The vast universal suffering feel as thine. Thou must bear the sorrow that thou claimst to heal. The daybringer must walk in darkest night. He who would save the world must share its pain. And I think this is this is part of his very long poem, and I can't remember, book length poem. And it's, he's talking here about if you want to go out and heal the world, you have to feel the pain of the world. And I think most of the time we're running away from it. We're saying, I'm not going to feel that pain. I'm going to get away from it in myself, and I'm going to get away from it in other people. And then we still think we can somehow heal it. So I think this is an important idea to keep in mind. Okay, nothing is happening. Wait a minute. Screen. Okay. Starting over again. Slideshow. Oh no. Oh, okay. Off we go. 5-minute summary here.
Ken Wilber and Grace and Grit look interesting.
Yep, we're going to get there. Okay, so I thought we might, reframe the way we look at disability, and we could see people with disability as volunteers for some of the hardest jobs in being human. We can see them as canaries in the mine. One of the things that we're discovering is that lots of people are unhappy and overstressed and in trouble. And people with illness were just the first ones to react to this world. I heard somebody describe the current state of the world as we've made a world that nobody wants to live in. And I thought, the level of unhappiness and dissatisfaction is just rampant. And I think we can see people with disability as the first ones to react to this. And then we could also see them maybe as bodhisattvas. Maybe these are the people who actually came to the end of the path and decided to come back into this world to help all the rest of us. Instead of trying to push people with illness away, maybe we could look at them with that kind of respect, that that's what they're doing for us. And then here's the quote from Ken Wilber that I thought was so wonderful. He writes at the end of Grace and Grit, he's made a promise to Treya, to his wife who is dying, that he will find her after death. And she wanted him to make that promise to her. And he's reflecting after she dies, and he says, I had it all backwards. I thought my promise was how I would help her, whereas it was actually how she would reach and help me again and again and forever again, as long as it took for me to awaken, as long as it took for me to acknowledge, as long as it took for me to realize the spirit that she had come so clearly to announce. And by no means just me. Treya came for all her friends, for her family, and especially for those stricken with terrible illness. For all of this, Treya was present. And that just chokes me up every time I read it. But I think he's right there. I think he's onto something, that people with illness are here, with disability, aging, all of that is here to teach us something about what's really important, to help us move off these messages from the first tier attitudes and start to realize what really matters in life. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we can just use the rest of the time to chat, questions, thoughts, anything.
And Lynn, the link to your transformation teaching, Koi illness as an
okay, you can
put that in the chat. So
yeah, okay.
We'll be monitoring things in the chat, and then also people can, using the reactions button in the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can raise your hand and we'll recognize that. So we've got some time.
Okay, so the Colon of Illness is a specific program. I also have a main website at Transformation Teaching, which you can link to the Colon of Illness there. So And there's a lot there. There are interviews with people with illness, and there's a whole bunch of resources and things like that that I try to curate.
Picking up on that last slide, Lynn,
Mhm.
you know, one has to wonder, would Ken Wilber had been the qualitative Ken Wilber we read without the death of Treya? And it was so early in his life and writing, and, you know, his marriage, his marriage was 5 months old and she had that illness. So, I mean, talk about being on the fast track to transformation.
Mhm.
And I hardly think he did that with consciousness at the point. You know, he just got swept along and was able to harvest later on all the gifts of going through that journey. I don't know if I would have the courage to do that.
Yeah, you're right, Tom. And you can see, those of you have seen the movie, perhaps Grace and Grit. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it came out last year. It's a beautiful movie. And you can see in it, I mean, Ken did not go willingly into that world. He fought it. I mean, it was not easy. It tore their marriage apart and themselves apart. The movie doesn't make much of this, but he also got ill during the course of this 5 years that the movie is about. So he was not well either. A very difficult thing. Yeah, I'm sure he would never have wished it on himself or on Treya, but it had to have an amazing impact on his growth to have to go through that, both as a caregiver and as a patient himself. I mean, he's still ill. He's dealt with that all his life. So I do think it can bring, somebody pointed out in the last group, it's not necessarily always a good thing. We can't think of it like that, but it can bring great depth and wisdom to people who go through it. And I've got for those of you who haven't read Grace and Grit, I have a book review on my website. If you want to, in an hour, get the book Grace and Grit, you can get it from there, or you can watch the movie too.
Lynn, I wanted to say that I'm working with a woman who has decided she's got a 40-year-old son who has had a traumatic brain injury, and he's severely disabled, and she's become his primary caregiver. But she's so angry that she's isolated and alone with this. You know, family members help, but not enough. I mean, she doesn't have any real respite from caring for him. And so it consumes her life. But your talk has really helped me see another avenue for her, because she's kind of stuck in the anger and indignation as to why is nobody helping and why is nobody seeing the importance of this. And I think I may be able to move her into being, instead of a victim, more of, you know, holding something, being an example, like kind of a shining example of what she is learning about caring for her son, what she is bringing forth. And I think I can push on that side a little bit more, so it doesn't just end up being her annoyance and frustration with people who she thinks has abandoned her, but something a little bit more aspirational.
Yeah, and well, I think it's terribly important to find other people in your condition too.
Mm-hmm.
We have a small caregivers group just started up on my site, and at the moment it's limited to people who come through the courses. But I've thought about trying to do something larger that more people could join, because it really makes a difference. Caregivers don't often get to talk to each other, and they often, one of the things Ken remarked on is, he said, it's never about you, because the other person is in such distress that your problems then become, well, nothing. So there's no way even to deal with the ordinary stresses of life without feeling like you're, you know, comparing yourself to what the other person is dealing with. So it's yeah, I think caregivers can get a lot from being with each other.
Thank you.
Then I'd like to jump in on that one, because I am a caregiver, and I'm in a group with other caregivers, and there's a lot of victim mentality in the caregiver community. And you know, it's true that in a sense we are you know, collateral damage to the initial illness. But the other thing I want to mention that is just the courage and the tenacity of people who are ill to live their life without the energy and the opportunity and all. You know, they just, like my wife, she just keeps going. It's just it's awesome. You know, it's just like it blows me away. And let's see, what else was I going to say? Oh, I was going to ask if maybe I can do this later. The spoons theory, that there's this idea that we all have a certain number of, they call them spoons. It's a evaluation of how much mental capacity or cognitive capacity we have in a given day. And for people with chronic illness, for example, they have a limited number of things. And like getting up and showering and getting ready to go, getting ready for the day can take up most of your available spoons. So it's very limiting. And if you're aware of that when you're dealing with somebody with chronic illness, then you can't blame them for not being able to do all the stuff that you want them to do. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's right. The idea, I've thought of it as terms of spoons of energy, that, you know, you use them up. Yeah, they're gone. And people just have nothing left. And most illnesses have fatigue as a part of them. And trying to, I've watched the people in my life trying to make a life with so many limited hours. I mean, you might have an hour, you might have 2 hours when somebody else has 12, and you're trying to get everything you want to have in your life into those 2 hours. Extremely, extremely difficult. And the lack of understanding outside of, you know, those very, very close to somebody, and even them. I mean, nobody really fully understands, I don't think, what it's like to be in that situation, unless you're with somebody else who has it. That's why I think support groups are so helpful, because you're with other people you don't have to explain yourself to. And that's just a great start when they know what your situation is, because otherwise you're sometimes beating your head against the wall trying to explain to a person why. And also, I think the unpredictability and variability. Somebody may be able to go to the store one day and then they're home in bed for 2 weeks recovering from it. So other people see them at the store and they think, well, you're fine. Why aren't you, you know, calling me? Why aren't you doing this? They don't understand that was the allotment of energy for that 2 weeks, and it doesn't, you know, they need to recover after that. So I see Mary.
Hi, I just had this thought that, you know, we could have a faux care, take it on that, say, what if I'm in hospice and I am a hospice volunteer, and I see a lot of the work that I do is more with the caregivers and for the caregivers than the patients themselves. But in an ideal kind of real acceptance of a situation, those people, the patients seem to be, you know, they're accepted, they're accepting of where they're at. And so what's my point about that? I you know, if we imagined, okay, well, you know, this too shall pass, including whatever I think is going on in this life. There's something uplifting in that when I work with these people that are in that acceptance, no matter what they're going through, no matter what they look like or how they're coming across to me.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think getting to that stage of acceptance, it's a long, hard journey to get there. I don't think it comes easily. People don't instantly say, oh, well, oh, look at this, just what I've got. Okay, fine. That doesn't happen. No.
Well, they're there, that's for sure. But,
yeah.
You know, I currently have a 97-year-old woman that's on hospice, and she's just the coolest thing. And, you know, at least 2 people have declared, 2 physicians have declared she's probably only has less than 6 months. And you know, she's a delight to be with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, there's some acceptance, I think, that comes with age, just because it happens so gradually and so steadily. Mm-hmm. You know, you notice one thing at 50 and another at 60, and then at 70, there's a lot more breaking down. And then there's, you know, it's just like, oh my God, now that too, you know, and the first one, the one you saw at 50 means nothing anymore. It's like, oh my God, I'd take that any day. So I think we have more time with aging, and we have more acceptance of aging. We're more inclined to give people space when they're older and recognize they can't do things. When people are younger and the illness is invisible, there's not much space given to people. There's very little grace or space given. Anything else?
We're also right about at 6 o'clock. So Eloy, did you want to mention again some meeting closing statements?
Yeah, Tom,
for next month again?
Yeah, Tom, do you want to tell us about next month?
Yes, I got exciting news that I think most of you know, that next month, February 12th, we have Jeff Saltzman coming. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure many of you have heard him. There can't be a better person. He describes himself as an on-ramp for Integral because he humbles himself so much to explain complex ideas. And it's not just the content, it's how the state experience that this guy is able to create. Some of you might have been at the What Next conference about 7 or 8 years ago. And he mastered or ceremonied that conference. And every morning we would start out with Jeff warming us all up. And the communal experience was overwhelming at number 8 o'clock in the morning, not sleeping very well because we're all in a hotel somewhere outside of Boulder. But that's the skill of Jeff Saltzman. So he's going to be with San Diego Integral. The name of the presentation is The Creative Power of the Cultural Wars. The Creative Power of the Cultural Wars. And I think we can all utilize that. A tendency to get polarized in some of the dialogue. But that's next month. If you're not signed up, get signed up.
Yeah, we'll try and figure out what went on with the link today, the Zoom link. I have a friend that had another meeting today. She said she had problems with her meeting as well. So I don't know if it's a Zoom problem. We're going to close the meeting, the formal meeting now, but we stick around for half an hour or longer, depending on how the conversation goes. But it's usually worthwhile to stick around and get into a little more depth on the topic and getting to know each other better. So please stick around if you can, and if you can't, thank you for being with us. And if you know people that wanted to come in and couldn't, we'll have a recording up in a couple of days, and we'll post it on the comments for this event. Any other announcements?
I just want to say thank you very much, Lynn. That was a fabulous presentation.
Oh, yes.
Really awesome information, and correlating it to the integral lens and the 4 quadrants was really useful for me personally, I know.
Oh, great.
So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you all hanging in there to get here. I didn't know if anybody'd be here when we got on.
Well, you handled the stress well coming into the meeting.
Yes.
That's what you learn dealing with it. Things change. Things don't go as planned.
Thank you, Lynn. We had a difficult time getting in, but in the end, I got in by completely getting out of Zoom and restarting the Zoom instead trying to just go hitting the back button, and that then finally managed to get us into the thing.
Yeah, good job.
Glad you made it.
Zoom leaves all kinds of traces on your computer, and if you don't erase that, you can't get back, and it's a problem.
That could be part of it, yeah.
I had a feeling about that.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We saw a lot of it, but hopefully we'll see the recording sometime. We will get a better idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Lynn, I wanted to get the informal discussion going. And I'm intrigued by your idea of an integral view of healthcare and what it would look like. We're obviously not there yet. Although individually, if we've been fortunate enough, we've done enough work, we've felt the transformative effect of disability or injury. To do it collectively, that a hospital of different professionals and patients riding that wave of transformation, it's a wonderful vision because we know that crisis kind of gets us outside of the box and puts things in perspective. We know that. We're hit with that lesson repeatedly. What an environment in a hospital, say, or in a rehabilitation, where that wave, if it can be surfed by everybody involved, is that some of the vision you have for an integral view of healthcare?
Well, exactly. Yes. In fact, we just started a book group a book writing group. And the idea is to come up with what needs to happen and to potentially put out a blueprint for some sort of, I don't know what to call it, a care center, but, you know, there might be an inner circle for people who need inpatient care, and then a larger circle, and then connection to the community. Anyway, the idea is to get together and try to put all of these ideas down using actually a 4-quadrant map is what we're doing. So I'm thinking of that, opening that up to other people too. I don't know how to technologically take in a whole bunch of ideas, but I think it would be like a crowdsourced idea and then put together a book that would be like a blueprint for what we're looking for, because things are changing and we might as well get some integral ideas out there for people to look at and to understand, because I don't know what's going to come out of this pandemic, but there's sure going to be change, and maybe we get to be part of the change. I mean, one of the things I've always thought about integrals, everybody's off doing their own thing, but as a force, we could come together in many areas of life and put forth some ideas. And if it were, you know, if I were working in healthcare and a book came out and it was a blueprint, I might read it, you know, and maybe there'd be a chance to get some stuff out there. So yeah, you're speaking right, you know, to me. So.
Can I just throw something in about that?
Yeah.
I do work in the healthcare system. I'm a psychologist, so I deal with insurance companies a lot. And one of the huge stumbling blocks I find is that the whole system is for-profit orange.
Yes.
And though the individuals in the system may be more green and above, the system is for-profit. And it's, how do you get past a system that's ensconced at one level that is counter to healing? Makes me crazy.
It is a crazy making question, because it's that view dominates things so much. I mean, I like to think that it's like the grass growing through the sidewalk, that people are gradually going to come up with new ideas, and it's going to go through it, and eventually that model will crumble. I mean, that's what I like to hope. But I think there's also the chance that things could be changed pretty quickly, given the incredible upheaval. I mean, it takes upheaval like this before change comes in.
True.
So I'm hopeful that you know, everybody's had a little time to reflect, whatever stage they're in. Maybe it's moved them a little bit. Maybe we've all grown a little bit from this, and people are clearly not satisfied. They're not happy with the system. So, you know, I don't know. It's everybody's guess what's going to happen. But
yeah, there was a movement in the Netherlands where some guy wanted to change nursing and make it more in-home available. And it was just one of those grassroots things where he started and other people joined in, and before long that it changed the way the formal healthcare in the Netherlands was administered, the nursing part of it anyway.
Yeah, I think that's one of those clumps of grass, and it ends up being very strong if it turns out to be good. I met a fellow who was started a company to train people to train caregivers to care for people at home, which is also sadly lacking, because most people, you know, somebody goes home and the caregiver has no idea what to do. They're sitting there in this very difficult position and scary position, because you don't want to make somebody worse and that sort of thing. So little things like that. I think just people like us going out and talking wherever it is we are, whatever we work in or whoever we know, the more we spread integral kinds of ideas around, the more they might catch. I mean, every one of these big movements has somehow grown itself, you know. Green is here. You know, it's settled in. You know, it started in the 60s, but it's grown. And so ideally Integral will do the same thing, and we'll have some new perspectives. So if any of you are interested in contributing to something like that project, or whatever projects we come up with, just write to me. It's lynn@transformationteaching.com if you've got ideas or you want to be engaged in some way.
Is there any kind of network currently for caregivers or training? My parents are dealing with cognitive decline, and I know there's the Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's.org, I think, is sort of a you know, organization, and they do have information for caregivers. They have you know, resources to find local support. It seems like that might be available sort of on a per situation basis. Like, okay, there's, you know, support for cancer people, there's support for, you know, your category. You can probably find a support group for it on Facebook. But I really like your idea of sort of training for caregivers generally, like almost as a movement to shift the thinking about disability across the board. In one of the breakouts, we were talking about how disability is sort of considered other, and it's like there's a norm, and the disability is like these outlier points, instead of that it's part of the normal continuum of life. Like the odds are very good that everybody's going to experience, either personally or someone that's close to them, super high. So it's like, to normalize it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's really integrated within each one of us. No one of us is completely healthy. No one of us is completely sick. I mean, nobody would be functioning. I mean, even somebody with a serious illness, most of their body is functioning well, or they wouldn't be living. And all of us, you know, have something, hay fever, or, you know, all the way up to, and so it's, you know, it's interwoven, it's interpenetrated into our world. And yet we keep trying to excise it somehow, like tear it out of ourselves and make it over there and say it's over there. No, it's not, it's right here. For all of us, it's right here. And I think seeing that, and seeing that the person, well, there are a lot of reasons why we don't see it. I mean, one, because a lot of it's invisible, but also people often who have an illness try to hide it, because they don't want to be noticed for their illness. They don't want to be, you know, it can cause people to lose jobs and things like that. So there's a tremendous amount of incentive not to make it a part of things. And but I think that needs to happen. I mean, I think anybody who's putting on an event needs to think about that. How do we cope? How do we help people who are disabled in some way to be a part of this event? Just in every walk of life, we need to integrate it.
Years ago, I read an article about a therapist that worked with adolescents, and he used to do some of his sessions in a morgue, just to put a new frame around, you know, with that unbounded energy and disregard for convention and structure. And I've often thought about that. I've never done it. I'd be afraid to get sued. But people used to wake people in their homes. You know, for 3 days, they'd lay in state downstairs in their homes. And I'm wondering if we lost something essential by making it so hygienic and something we do over there. And now people are even getting away from that, because there's nothing like that big frame to decide what's important.
Yeah, I think you're right. We don't see death. Well, we're like the Buddha. We're all in our little palaces, and we're putting outside all of those things that we don't want to see. And it's even, yeah, like you said, now people go to the hospital, and now nobody can visit the people in the hospital. So it's even more, we're even more separated. We're all in our homes. I don't even know how to relate to people anymore. I mean, if I see somebody, how close do I get? Do I say, you know, it's so awkward, so difficult. And it's just in some ways sometimes easier, like, okay, you just go over there and I don't have to deal with it. So yeah, I think we lose, I don't know, I think we lose the reality of life. Like you said, the frame, you know, everybody's going to die. So yeah, take that into account. And it used to be that people died at home and everybody, you know, the family knew it and everybody knew it, but now it's quite different.
Yeah, and another factor is that when some people get ill, they get angry, and it can make it very difficult to be a caregiver for somebody that's angry about their illness. Like, really difficult.
Yeah, and I think we have to be tolerant of that too. You know, it's like, I remember there was a movie, La Dame aux Camélias, about this woman who had TB, and it was just this, oh, she was so spiritual and she was so lovely and she was, you know, and so now people who are sick get this idea that they have to be perfect. They have to be, you know, bearing it with grace and beauty. And, you know, no, I think people should be able to get angry but you're right. I mean, it's not easy when you're trying to take care of somebody who's angry. I agree with you, or in grief, or in denial. That's another one that's very difficult, if somebody refuses to acknowledge that they're what you do then. I mean, you can't, and then you feel really helpless. And the caregiver is doubly powerless, because the person with the illness is powerless over the illness. But then the caregiver has ideas as to how it might help, but then they can't put them across. So they're even less able to have some control. That's another thing it teaches us. We're not in control. I mean, things like this, we didn't control this pandemic. It just showed up, by golly. And that's what illness does in all of our lives. It just appears, and then we try to get a handle on it. And it sort of weasels its way outside of all the compartments.
I want to invite people that don't want to go on camera to put a question or comment in the chat.
Oh, I missed the chat. Yeah, okay.
There's just been thank yous mostly, but.
Okay. Well, thank you all.
You know, we were talking earlier about how you change systems like a healthcare system and that sort of thing. And it occurs to me that one of the lessons of this pandemic, one of the lessons to an orange society, is we really can't go it alone. We really can't. We've got to come back to community. We've got to come back to, you know, cooperating, helping each other out. And that might be a way of moving up to green again, you know, with that sense of community again. It would be very ironic, but, you know, very welcome that this catastrophe has really made us feel how awful it is to be isolated and alone and crave the company of others. Obviously, I'm speaking for myself now. But yeah.
Well, I think it's true. I mean, everybody has had their community ripped away from them, and they are hungry for that. So yeah, how do we put that together again? And how do we do it in a really healthy way? Yeah, I mean, I hope that new ways of doing that show up.
And just the concept of interdependence, you know.
Yeah, right. That we do need each other. Well, clearly we need each other. And I mean, look, I mean, all of us can think, what if I got a really bad case of COVID? I would need every resource out there. And thank God it's there. Thank God for these nurses and doctors that have, I can't imagine the burnout level at this point. I mean, we were burned out a year ago. So yeah.
We can't wait to get to Sedona, Lynn.
Yeah. Are you coming one of these days?
Do people know Lynn runs Sedona Integral?
My husband and I. Yeah, you're always welcome to come to that. We meet every Thursday at 11 Mountain Time, which is Phoenix time right now. In the summer, it changes to Pacific time. But we put on a program every week. It's usually, we might watch a video and then discuss it, or when we were doing it in person, we would do presentations and things like that. Sometimes we invite speakers to come. You guys do much more of that. But anybody's welcome. So again, write to me again if you'd like to be on that list, and we'll send it out. You can join us. Yeah, tomorrow.
Lynn, you talked about stage of development, but how do you deal with patients with dementia, Alzheimer, who seem to be out of the scheme at all? Because, well, we don't know even what world they're living at. I mean, I think it puts a lot of burden on the caregiver, not just the other things that you mentioned, but just the inability to connect with the patient or the ill person. So they may feel great, but the people around them don't.
No, it's a terrible thing. My father had Alzheimer's, and I watched my mother trying to deal with it, and then the rest of us, and it was incredibly difficult. And I think the same happens with addictions. Trying to deal with a person in an addiction is another. It's the people around who are really suffering terribly, and how to help them. You know, I don't think we realize how many people are dealing with this kind of thing. I mean, I think somebody did statistics about 1 in 10 families was dealing with addiction. And then you think about the number of families dealing with dementia, the number of families dealing with Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia. It's huge. There are huge numbers of people in these lives that we kind of pretend aren't there. We just, you know, this orange world, as you pointed out, Lorraine, it's so strong that we have this picture of, oh, everybody's out there healthy and doing everything. No, they're not. I mean, if they're not sick themselves, they're trying to take care of somebody who is. So
those percentages are growing, right?
Yeah, they're growing.
Yes.
We're going to have more and more people in this circumstance. I know, for example, that ME/CFS affects about 2 million people in this country, and long COVID is very similar. And so we're expecting another 2 million people from that. So that's a doubling of one type of illness. So I don't know what's going to happen to others, but probably similar.
The numbers for dementia and Alzheimer's are supposed to skyrocket soon too, because it's largely a lifestyle result of lifestyle factors.
And also aging. If we're going to move to 30% of the population over 65, the number of people with Alzheimer's over 65 that's where most of those patients come from.
Right. Well, it's happening earlier and earlier too, because of some of the diabetes and things that are related.
Lynn, I wanted to ask you about, transitioning or working with people from, the stage of hope and resilience to one where they're trying to, accept the end of life. I've got a client who's got a glioblastoma, and she was diagnosed about 3 months ago. So she's in the treatment stage with radiation. But, you know, the doctors this is not going to be a cure for her. It's prolonging her life, but working with her will definitely shift at some point to more of a recognition of the end, and wondering what your thoughts are about that, or anybody else's.
Well, I don't know. I think people have to come to it on their own terms and when they're ready. I think some people never accept it. And I was in a discussion somewhere and somebody was saying they wanted to help their father realize that he was dying and he had to get it. And because of, you know, and somebody else said, why does he have to get it? Why can't he do this in his own way? So, you know, if somebody wants to go into death in denial, then maybe that's what we just help them to do. And if they want to take stock of where they are, and, you know, then we help them to do that. I think there's way too much forcing of people with illness to say you must look at it this way, you must act this way. So I would say the same about death. I don't think I'd want somebody telling me how I should die. Mm-hmm. You know, I might like some suggestions, but I don't know that I want to be forced into one track.
Yeah.
It's like a balancing act in the sense that the ill person doesn't want to be told how to die, but the caretaker doesn't want to be told completely how to be taken care of that person either. It's like they need each other. And I know in my own case, when I got to the point a couple different times when I faced death head on and I surrendered to it and didn't die, that made all the difference in my ability to be alive, want to be alive, and have good attitude and be realistic even about it, because I wasn't afraid of death anymore.
Well, that I think is, you know, like one of those spiritual aspirations we can have, that something like illness can lead us into those spiritual depths and develop that kind of thing.
Yeah, but that's not to say that, to the earlier point, that we can force or push or cajole the ill person to face death.
Yeah.
That requires a lot of inner work in my experience. But I do think that there's this balancing thing. It's not like the ill person should be calling the shots or the caregiver should be calling the shots. There's this dance of sorts that goes on. It seems to have to go on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we are all in this together. We are all caught up in it. I mean, and everybody counts, I think. You know, the caregiver counts and the ill person counts. And ideally, people would be gracious with each other and give everybody an opportunity to deal with it in their own way. That doesn't always happen, of course.
That brings...
Just noticed that my husband has come to the door twice about dinner, so I'm going to have to go shortly.
Okay. I was just thinking about when you and Larry were talking about illness as being a catalyst or the gift being that leading the ill person into the dark night of the soul, so that there can be some transformation through that process. Not that it happens a lot, but it's available.
Yeah, I've run into some just amazing people for whom that has happened, that they really, really have, they've taken on, well, many of them have been sick for 30, 40 years. You know, they've come through all those stages of having gone through denial and gone through anger and gone through grief and come to acceptance. It's not an easy thing, but I think that there are people. I've met a lot of people actually in this world. Of course, that's the world I'm in, but I'm just so in awe of really what they could do. I mean, I got sick myself 2 years ago, and it was like, are you kidding me? I thought I was invincible, you know. And there are people who've been dealing with this for decades, and you know, I felt somehow impinged upon, and it shouldn't happen. I went through all the same things that I see out there. So it's not easy. Well, I think I better go.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you all. It was great to talk to you.
Please warm hello to Jose.
I will. Thanks, Tom. We'll see you soon then.
Okay. Bye, Lynn.
Alone again?
Any other comments?
At the
Questions?
second line.
I think one of the hardest things to do, and I think about this with patients as well as family, is just to be with them wherever they're at. You know, if they're angry or in denial or whatever it is, it's really hard work. If you think you've got something to offer, or you're in the fix it mode, or it's just so hard just to be with them where they're at. But apparently it's very, very healing because they feel affirmed, I guess, you know, which is what we're all looking for, right? So anyway.
The challenge I have around being with somebody with illness is not wanting to enable them further in their illness by just accepting 100% everything, you know, just their entire way of being, be it their anger, their nastiness, their whatever. I don't know that that's like what I call it enabling. I don't know that that's healthy for their unhealthiness. To just
well, yeah. Being present with them, I guess I'm thinking of it from a therapy point of view, where you offer empathy for their feeling. Like, you know, just sort of mirroring their anger. Yeah, this illness really has taken a lot. And just affirming what they're already feeling is, for me, that's very different from enabling.
Yeah, the caregiver needs to be able to take care of themselves, to set some boundaries. But yes, the best therapy does seem to be just being with them, as opposed to trying to fix.
I think it would require being able to be authentically compassionate.
Yeah.
Right. I can see myself coming across as being condescending by, oh yeah, isn't it terrible that, you know, that you have to be going through this? But I guess
party thing.
Yeah, and I guess since I lifted my own self up on my bootstraps, as it were, I would want to be supportive of other people trying to do that. So I don't know if I could genuinely feel bad for their illness.
I think there's a dance though between the two. I mean, it's like there's being with, and then there's, you know, taking care of oneself. Like if I'm triggered by how they're being, then I need to take care of myself, and they might not be the best person to process that with. And if there's something that I do want to contribute to them, for me, I think the most important thing that I have to remember is asking, do they want to hear it? Because you know, a lot of times that actually works just fine, but you know, then you know, or they can say, nope, not right now. But I don't always remember. Oh, are you going tomorrow? Bye. Thank you. Bye. Have a good night. Yeah, so that's a challenge for me sometimes, is to just ask. But yeah, there's definitely times when I don't want to. I've been caregiver in several cases with really sick people over multiple years, and it can be challenging. And I think it's been a really good lesson in being aware of my own energy levels and what, you know, have I used up my capacity to do the compassionate thing right now? And do I need to say, I love you and I got to talk to you later?
Yeah. And I had to go through a lot of cycles of forgiveness because there was an underlying resentment that I wasn't like it wasn't in my face. It was just like underneath. And until I went through a forgiveness workshop, I didn't even realize that that was there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was talking about it I was thinking about it more from a therapist point of view in terms of what kinds of interventions do you use? And, you know, this is not the time for positive affirmations, and this is not the time for some, you know, cognitive strategy of positive psychology or, you know, forcing them through stages. But yeah, as a therapist, sometimes I just need to affirm where they're at. You know, as a caregiver, right, your personal feelings enter into it, you know, in a much larger degree. And I wasn't thinking about that part. Yeah.
Also, the challenges as a caregiver, sometimes you sort of have to say, no, this is what's happening. You're going to bed at this hour because I have to go to bed at this hour. So there's some boundaries there. But also, as a caregiver, there are certain situations where, you know, there's nothing you can do but reflect back to them because they don't have the cognitive function to handle anything more advanced than that.
Yeah.
So that's the bottom line too.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be their pity party. That's the best they can do. And they can't grow up anymore at that point.
Yeah. My wife goes through flare-ups. So it you know, it just gets so bad that she just can't emotionally handle it very well. And I've learned that I just need to stand in the, you know, in the flames of that. And because, you know, I would argue about it at first, and, you know, what the hell, you know, now it's just like, okay, let me have it. Wow. That's all I can do.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of like holding the bucket.
I'm not quite sure I get that analogy, but
holding the bucket, like they're gonna barf on me.
Okay.
So I'm gonna step to the side.
That's what came to mind for
me personally, and you can barf right here, and I can be very compassionate. Hold the bucket. You got any more? Because I got a big bucket. And I love you. Here's a bucket.
The advantage of that analogy is that holding the bucket, it's not about you. Whereas if the person is blowing up and they're blowing up at you, even though they're upset about their own condition, blowing up at you,
exactly.
Then it's like you are the bucket.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I can always make me not the bucket from my perspective, whether even if they wanted me to be. Yeah. So it's helpful as a caregiver for that perspective. Yeah. I have to go, y'all, too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I do too.
Dinner calls.
Nice discussion. That was a good presentation.
Yeah.
It was great. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
All right. See you guys.
Take care.
Bye.
For further information, including upcoming events, resources, links to our Facebook and Meetup pages, and our fabulous donate button, please visit our website at sandiegointegral.org. Donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue to provide information and connection within the Integral community.